Glad to see everyone out here this morning, and I think we're about ready to sum up all the generations all the way down to Abraham. And next week I'm going to try to locate a pretty decent map of all of Abraham's journeys, of where all he went and when he went and the directions and all that kind of stuff, so that you'll have that. And as we go through his life in Genesis, you'll be able to sort of trace back to that map and see where he was at and where he went and all those kind of things. So we'll try to do that next week. But here we are in Genesis chapter 11. We just got through coming through chapter 10, and we got through Noah's family and all that situation, and now we're fixing to head into the next dispensation. We've went through the innocence from Adam to his fall, went to conscience from fall of Adam to the flood. And now we went from the flood, and now we're fixing to hit the Tower of Babel, if you remember that. And we'll try to go through that, and that'll end up being the next judgment that God has on people to actually change that particular dispensation over to the dispensation of promise. So let's begin reading Genesis chapter 11. It says, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there." Now, the thing about it is that you start thinking about it, we went through chapter 10 and showed how everybody's sort of scattered, right, from different areas. In reality, I think that's sort of after chapter 11, okay, because chapter 11 is everybody's still one language, and everybody's sort of still hanging together, and everybody's talking the same language and everything else. And notice it says, and the whole earth was one language, and it came to pass as they journeyed. So therefore, this is sort of like and remember the last chapter, it says, and each one after their own tongue. Well, the tongues hadn't been changed yet. So therefore, when they got scattered, it was after the Tower of Babel, okay? So keep that in mind. It's sort of like a parenthetical. Oh, by the way, here's all the generations and where they went and all that kind of stuff. Now I'll give you a little bit more like we did in Revelation. There's a whole lot of sequence of things going on. Then all of a sudden, oh, parenthetical. Oh, by the way, I'm going to tell you this too that happens. So that's the kind of parenthetical that you see here in Genesis 10 and 11. It says, and they dwelt there in the land of Shinar. And if you remember, we'll sort of show that in a little bit. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city, and a tower whose top may reach into heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." What a prophecy that was. But what you'll find is that they're all of one language, they're all sticking together, and they go down into the land of Shinar. And if you look on your maps that we had from last time, it's basically, here's the Persian Gulf area, and this is pretty much the land of Shinar in this area right here. Right in this area here. So you can see that that's toward the Gulf, Persian Gulf, if you notice it where it is now. I think this map is a few pages back that we had last week. It's back on page 87 of your notes. But that's where they are gathering together, and they're wanting to go build something, okay? And in Genesis 10, it said everybody was of their own language, but here we say that everything is one language. So we can see that it's a little bit more of a parenthetical the way chapter 10 was written. And the thing about it is that if you look at it, this passage speaks of nothing of God. Let us. Go to let us. Okay? Build us a city. Okay? So basically, this whole thing, they're together and everything, but they're, and you know, Nimrod was a powerful guy back at that point. And so from that standpoint, they're fixing to go down there and build a tower. And that tower is not to worship God, but it's to worship a false god. Okay, because that's what towers were built. They built a city, but they built a tower to actually worship false god, just like you see all these towers and everything else are out there in all these pagan lands that actually build towers for that purpose. And it's not going to reach heaven from the standpoint of God's heaven, because you notice that's a little h. It's just basically getting up to the clouds. That's what their intent is, to get up to the clouds, to where basically they can do things. But when God wants you to have an altar for him, what's his requirements on that altar? No man modifies it. Okay, it's not to be made of hands. And so here, everything's made of man. So you can see the difference in the way that they're actually approaching this tower from the standpoint. When Noah got out of the ark, he went and found an altar, but that altar was not hewn by man. It was basically something that was just there when he offered upon it. Then down in verse 5, it starts saying, it says, the Lord came down to see the city. So here we have the tower. And so Lord, and notice it's capital L-O-R-D. Okay? What does capital L-O-R-D in the Old Testament mean? Who? Means God the Father, right? Capital L, little O-R-D means Christ. All right? So here we have the Lord said, behold, the people. The Lord came down to the city of the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let, now, changes, let us. Now, who's that referring to? God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, just like we saw over in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, when he said, let us go down and make man in our own image. So, okay, all right. And there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. So we can see here that supposedly the Tower of Babel is somewhere down here in this area, but it never has been found because it got left off building, and really we don't know if that's it or not. So there's really not an absolute proof that whatever ruins they found in that area are actually the Tower of Babel. So, but somewhere it is in the land of Shinar, okay, on the map. But in verse 6, chapter 6 and verse 5, but notice what happens here in, let's see here, let me go back and find the verse. Look at verse 7. Let's see. Verse 6, rather. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. That's what God says, right? Now, when you look back at imagine from man, what do we find? Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. All right? Then down in chapter 8, verse 21. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, neither will I again smite. So the imagination that God's referring to here in this chapter is basically not good. Because the imagination of man's heart and mind is evil continually from the ground up, unless there's some kind of restraint given there. But when judgment is passed, it reads the same as when God created man in chapter 1 about let us go down and just confuse the languages, just like he did over in Adam's day when they all went down. So man fails once again. Given the opportunity, you only have, and the thing about it is, when you sit down and think about the dispensations, we're already down to the 4th dispensation, and we're only in chapter 11 of the first book. But we're actually almost, 1,800, 1,900 years from the time they created man. So we're quite a ways down the road time-wise, but not in the book-wise. And but he's going to scatter the nations. And the thing about it is, the specific thing that they actually tried not to do, they did. They tried not to get scattered like Cain got scattered when he basically did his due. He got forbidden. But now, when they had this thing, they're basically, God's going to scatter them throughout all the nations, just like we had last week about even Japheth sort of goes northwest and north, Shem goes east, southeast, and Ham goes west, southwest, okay, from all those different angles. Now, just a little bit of history, and I'm not going to, there's a book out there called The Two Babylons. And if you ever get it, it'd probably be a good thing for you to go back and find from Amazon's probably got it, and I think it's from Hislop, is Hislop is his name. But it'll give you the history of what Nimrod set up from the standpoint of worship. Because this is, remember, Tower of Babel is from what? Babel means what? Confusion. Okay? And this is the original Babylon. Okay? What's referred to over in Babylon in Revelation chapter 17, we have basically the mystery Babylon, which is basically going to be the mystery form of the Roman government, which is basically the Roman Catholic system. And it's set up for the one world religion. And here they had a one world religion. It was all set up the same way. And what you'll find is a lot of the things that actually was worshiped back then in this pagan one world religion is still present in a lot of the other religions today, because guess what? They were all one world. They scattered. They have similar traits in all the different religions that you'll find. And the pagan worships you find it over in the India Hindu, you find it in the Far East, you find it in even in the Roman Catholic system. And one of the things that you'll find is that the history of, if you read that book, it refers to Nimrod supposedly died, and his his wife was Semiramis, okay, which was one of the people back then. Then she claims that she had got with child from the spirit of Nimrod and had his son, basically Nimrod reincarnated. Okay? All right? And over in Jeremiah, and she was basically referred to as Semiramis and Ashtaroth as far as a lot of the Old Testament writings. And look in Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 17, it says, "But we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings and our princes, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well, and saw no evil. Basically, they're saying they're going to worship the Queen of Heaven. Okay? And that Queen of Heaven was this Ashtoreth Semiramis, however you pronounce her name. If you look at basically how all that stuff started. And that Queen of Heaven, who's that referred to now in the other Catholic Church? Who's that referring to? See, it's not the fact that you have Mary specifically, you still have the same position, just another person's name with it. Okay? And that is the fact that she is the mother of the Holy Child, just like she said here in that. So I would recommend you go back and get that book if you get a chance to read it. And The Two Babylons, it's written there in your notes. But that's the origin of all the false religions you see today is Babylon, ancient, before the confusion of the languages. Because they were worshiping that same situation, and that's what happens when all the world gets together in one way. And that's what we're going to have in the tribulation period, one world government, one world church. And so it's going to come right back to the same type of situation that you had back then. And but this is the origin. I won't go into a whole lot of that detail there because there's not a lot in the book. But it is a good thing to go back and actually get that other book and read through it. Verse 9 says, "Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth." So Babel means confusion. And basically that's exactly what Babylon means. It's a place of confusion. And the people did not want to be scattered in verse 4. That was their whole goal, was let's go build this city and let's all get together so we all won't scatter. Guess what? Judgment came and they scattered because they couldn't talk. Can you imagine what was going on there? Imagine all these people working together, building bricks and putting them order together, and they said, okay, yeah, let's do this, do this. And all of a sudden, next morning they get up and says, what? No, I mean, can you imagine what went on there when all that happened? I mean, that's what happened. They couldn't. It's just like you trying to understand Japanese. Unless you've heard that language, you have no clue what they're saying. But that's what happened to confusion, all these languages. And, Lord didn't destroy it by water, but he sure did confuse their language pretty good. And even after all that, they still had all different types of dialects and everything else that's created since then, like Southern. Southern country folks, we have our own dialect, right? Say what? Yep. Verse 10. Now, we'll read quite a bit here because this is pretty much a lot of the things that are going down from the standpoint of this again is from the time of generations of Shem. See, last time we went from Noah and went through Shem, Japheth, and Ham and their descendants. Now this is going to focus purely on Shem, okay? Because guess what? That's where the lineage of Christ is going to come from. And so that's where the focus is going to be from this point forward in the book of Genesis. And I don't know if anybody, I know my daughter, and I'll give her a little bit of kudos here. She's the one that actually cuts up and punches a hole in all these notes for me, okay? So I print them up and get them ready and then print them out, but she does all the cutting and the hole punching, so you can thank her for her help on that. But she's also somewhat into writing books and everything. But one of the things what you'll find is that when you're trying to write something, and think about this when you look at the book of Genesis, okay? Like I said, book of Genesis, we're already almost 2,000 years into time, okay? All right, and all you've got is 10 chapters. All right, by the time Moses gets around, you're probably about a little over past 2,000 years. All right, Moses writes, and then the whole Old Testament is from the time of Adam all the way down to the book of Malachi. All that's about the Jews from the time you get to Abraham on. Okay? So we're almost here to the point of 2,000 years from Genesis chapter 11 all the way through the end of Malachi. But the first 10 chapters, 11 chapters, is pretty much 2,000 years, same amount of time. Okay? So what you find in a lot of times when you're trying to write and you're trying to focus on one certain thing, which the Old Testament is focusing on the Jew, from Abraham on down, is that you'll provide a brief summary, okay, of what's going on to get you down to where you want to focus. But it covers the whole gamut to where that basically people get the big picture, but then you're wanting to focus just on the line of Shem, okay? And that's what you find here in the book of Genesis on how God set it up to where that you don't really need to know a whole lot more other than what I'm fixing to tell you on what went on before Shem and all the way down to Abraham. But I'm going to give you that broad brush. That broad brush handles a lot of mankind. I mean, it gives a lot of mankind's personalities, traits, and everything else. We're evil continually. Imaginations are evil. And the thing about it is, we're going to go away from God rather than go to God unless something happens and gives us. So recognize that's what these first few chapters are, okay? It's just a summary, but it gives us and it gives us the rainbow. It gives us all those kind of things that man now can't dispute, okay? They're still there. But in verse 10, says, these are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old, and I'm going to put this one up here to try to show you a little bit about this Shem. We're basically down to this area here. Noah was there, and then we're fixing to get to Shem, and all this is fixing to be his generations from there on down. From here, all that area there. And so you'll see some traits of what's fixing to happen. Generation of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Remember, they were born, Shem, Ham, and Japheth was born at Noah when he was 500 years old. Flood happened at 600. So basically, Arphaxad was born 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived, after he begat Arphaxad, 500 years, begat sons and daughters. So he lived quite a long time, okay? All right? And notice how he was over 100 years old when he begat his first son, okay? Now, Arphaxad lived 5 and 30 years. Well, that's a whole lot less, ain't it? And begat Salah. And Arphaxad lived, after he begat Salah, 403 years, shortening down a little bit. Instead of 600, down to 400 and something. And begat sons and daughters. And Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Salah lived, after he begat Eber, 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived, after he begat Peleg, 430 years and begat sons and daughters. So here we see that we have all of these down through here, down through Eber, and they're all living somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 years after Shem lived 600. But notice the change here of what's fixing to happen. Let's see, where was I at? Yeah. And Eber lived 40 and 3 years and begat Peleg, and Eber lived, after he begat Peleg, 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu, and Peleg lived, after he begat Reu, 209 years, a reduction of 200 years, okay? So we're starting to see a lot more reduction. And begat sons and daughters, and Reu lived 230 years, lived 230 years, and begat Serug. And Reu lived after he begat Serug 270 years, and begat sons and daughters. Serug lived 30 years, and begat Nahor. And Serug lived after he begat Nahor 200 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 29 years, and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So you can see a continual reduction in the amount of years being lived from 400 down to 200, and through that whole cycle there. And so what you'll find is the atmosphere is changing. I mean, it changed quite a bit after the flood, but now it's still getting a little bit more. And which basically that in itself throws holes in all the different carbon dating methods they use today for dating any kind of organic material, which is basically humans or anything of that sort. That method assumes everything has been the same ever since the beginning, which we know for sure is not true. So from that standpoint, that is the way that we see here, and the descendants down to Abram, and note, it does not discuss other children. So therefore we're focusing on Shem, and the ages are getting smaller and smaller. And the fact is that when they're actually having children, it's getting younger and younger. Okay? So if you notice this next little table, what I put in there is that I put their age and then when they had their first child right beside of it. So that sort of gives you a little quick summary. But notice that Terah sort of was a little bit of an opposite thing there, where he lived 70 years before he begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And notice that the age between those three are not given again. What does that probably mean? Since he didn't say the ages before those, what does that mean? Probably triplets, once again. You know, not for sure, but that's the way it's written. So then I think we want to try to focus on something a little bit unique here in the rest of the verses. In verse 27, it says, "Now these are the generations of Terah." Now, Terah is the father of Abraham, right? Okay. Begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran begat Lot. Now, you know Lot's going to be mentioned a lot later, right? A lot. I couldn't resist that one. And Haran died before his father, Terah, in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. So what you'll find is that this is the Ur down in this area, okay? All the way down. And what you'll find is on the blue part here, the little darker blue from this lighter blue, the indication is that the Persian Gulf actually came in a lot further back then than it does now. And that sort of made me think, it says, well, aren't we supposed to say that the waters are getting higher rather than lower? Everybody's saying all the earth water in the north is melting and all that kind of stuff, and water's going to rise. But anyway, there's a good possibility of the Gulf actually being further in at that point, because all these cities, if you think about it, they're going to be right on the water to try to navigate and everything else. So they're going to be down there close to the water. But that's where Haran, now Haran was one of Terah's sons, but he died before his father did, okay? But he was the father of Lot. And he was also the father of Milcah, okay? Now what you're fixing to find out on some of that here in a minute, okay? Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran. So Nahor married his niece. Okay? If you don't really sit down and read it, you'll pass right over it. But he married his own niece. Okay? And the father of Iscah, but Sarah was barren and she had no child. So it says that Nahor married Milcah, the father of Iscah, so he was having children. But Sarah didn't have any. And Terah, notice, Abram was not the first one to leave Ur of Chaldees. Everybody thinks that he's the one that up and left first. No, Terah was. Terah uprooted his kids and his family first from Ur of the Chaldees and went north. And what's interesting about this, notice what it says. And Terah took Abram his son and the Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son. And notice Haran died in the land of the Ur of Chaldees, right? So he died in his city of his nativity where he was born. But what was interesting when I started reading through this and paying attention to it, and Sarah's daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. So Terah was the one that started the trip to Canaan, not Abraham. Is that news to you? All right. And notice what happens. And they came to where? Haran, which is his son that died in the land of Ur. So the question is that did Haran actually go build a city and then go back to die in his nativity? I don't know. There's not any more detail given on that one. But it looks like they went up to Haran, which is where his son may have built a city there and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So Terah died before he got to Canaan. But he's the one that uprooted his family to start heading that way. All right? I'm just reading it like it says. A lot of people will take it and say, well, Abraham was the one that got, in next chapter, Abram is the one that picks up from the land of Haran and heads up to the land of Canaan. And that's who God blessed. But Terah is the one that started that journey. Haran was the son of Lot. He dies in his original, then Sarah, of course, and Terah is the one that actually started the journey out of the land of Ur of the Chaldees. So we have that, and then of course, what you'll find is in the next chapter is when basically God calls Abraham out to start his trip up to the land of Canaan. And basically he provides, and notice that, like I said, each dispensation that we have, now we're fixing to start the fourth one, each dispensation goes from basically a condition and then a judgment, and each one also starts with a covenant. And this one, next one's fixing to start with the covenant as well, with God, between God and Abraham. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of feel, and we'll get into Abram's life a little bit. Like I said, I know I have, and let me see if I can find it quickly, and I'll show it to you. I think I've got one somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, see, here the back of my Bible has something like this that has the journeys of Abraham like that. I'll try to find something like that hopefully you can fold out maybe a little bit bigger than what you've got in your little notes, to where that you can have that. And as we go through his life, then we can actually trace it where it's at. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen anything like those or not. My Bible has them for Abraham, Saul, David, Solomon, Paul, Christ, has it for a lot of those. So it's a good reference book. Anybody got any questions or anything they want to bring up before we dismiss this morning? Appreciate your attention. Brother Dale, would you dismiss us in a word of prayer?